Okay, so when we're using pencils with regular drawing, a 2B pencil is the best just for sketching purposes, and checking on the side of the pencil, this is how we check to see what grade of pencil that we're using. 2B is just a good softness of pencil. It's not too soft, not too hard. Make sure it seems obvious, but make sure it's a sharpened pencil ready to go. There's a couple of ways, obviously, of holding a pencil. We're used to holding it in a normal writing position so that we can get a nice strong position for drawing lines, but we can also hold it in a very different way. We can hold it with the hand over the top of the pencil, almost like as if we're holding our knife, cutting our dinner up. You can put your pointy finger over the top for some guidance as well, and this allows us to use more of the side of the pencil rather than the tip of the pencil. So by doing this, and it takes a while to get used to this, but what I'm doing is I'm using the flatter side, not the tip, and it allows me to get some really smooth shading. So if I was to hold it normally to shade, you can see that I'm getting a very different style of shading. Now, there's nothing wrong with that kind of style of shading, and that might be the style of shading that we want to achieve, especially if we were doing etchings or cross-hatchings to try and get that kind of look. But if we want real smooth kind of shading, especially if we want to do some blending, that's a really good method to drop your hand over the top and to use the side of the pencil for doing some shading. When you're using your pencil, also think about, okay, so this next one's smudge stick. This is what one of these is a smudge stick. It's also known as a paper stumpy as well. Basically, it's a compressed rolled up piece of paper that has two ends looking a bit like a pencil. If it was a clean one, didn't have all the graphite all over the ends, if I rubbed it on the paper, it wouldn't do anything. It would just be paper on paper. The idea is instead of using your finger, it allows us to have controlled area for smudging. So if I lay down some graphite from my pencil first, and I can also do this with some lines. What I can now do is, using my smudge stick, if I use the tip of it, I can pull out just more lines of it. If I can zoom in, you'll be able to see kind of more lines of pulled out smudging. Whereas if I drop my hand over the top and use more of the side of the smudge stick, I can get a much smoother smudging. I can smudge the area that I was shading originally, and I can pull out this area of a lighter tone as well. So it's really good if you're using to create shadows in your drawings as well. So it does also work if you've just done a line. Obviously it's not going to work as well, but it's much better for creating that really smooth tone of shading. So in this one, we can actually use an eraser, not just to erase out mistakes, but also use it to create highlights. So if we lay down some graphite first, this is particularly good if you were creating hair, for example. So this is just an area of graphite. Imagine if we were drawing areas of hair, for example. And then we get our eraser. First start with your eraser, you'll find more often than not it'll be quite dirty to start with, so it's really important that you clean it off. To clean it off just on a table, you want to give it a really good clean, give it a rub. Just be aware that it may well rock the table and you don't want to find it's bumping people who are drawing, so just be aware of others. So again, you can see that's really cleaned up that area. And now I can go backwards and forwards in an area and pull out highlight, clean it off again if you want a really nice clean bit of eraser. And I can also pull it through to create lines. If you can get the corner of a rubber or the edge of a rubber, you can sometimes get a much finer line like I did there. So it's about finding corners or edges of rubbers that will then create thinner lines of highlights. So looking at grades of pencils, the standard one we tend to use for just sketching is a 2B. If you ever pick up a pencil, say from Smiggle or just a standard stationery store, and it doesn't have what grade of pencil on the edge it is, it's more than likely a HB. So a HB is in the middle between the H's, the range of H's. So if I put HB up the top here, HB is in the range, so this is the H range, so then it would go to, for example, 2H, 3H, 4H, 5H, 6H, 7H, 8H, and so on. And then this way we'd be going to 2B, 4B, 6B, so, you know, all the way that way. So in technical studies, when you're doing really technical drawings, really sharp lines, you'd be in the H range, but in art, where we want to be softer lines, more sketchy, then we're more in the B ranges. So 2B being kind of our main sketching pencil, and then we're going to have a look at, so if I draw, this is going to be the 2B, so I'm going to kind of go light, so I should come darker, pressing really heavy, then pulling back on the pressure. So this is a 2B. Then I have a 4B, so really heavy, pulling back, and you can see already this is you know, darker, got a wobbly lead, and then this one here is a 6B, and you can feel when you're drawing with it that it's a really soft lead inside, so it's very easy to smudge. You know, if I was to draw a line down it and compare that, you can already see that the difference in the line. This is a sharper line, this is a much thicker, chunkier, easier to smudge kind of line, this one, whereas if I use different ink on this one, that's a lot harder to smudge. So, and if we did a line going this way, up in the B range. So that just gives you an idea about grades of pencil. So if you want a really dark area of graphite on your picture, then you could use a softer pencil, softer meaning higher number in the Bs. If you want to have a sharper line, or if you're just simply doing some sketching, then I'd be using a 2B pencil, which is a firmer pencil. Okay, so this is a graphite stick. They start normally with a piece of paper around the outside. This one's lost its paper. They are very, very messy. And see if I just put my fingers slightly on this one, it's already covering me in graphite. But the great thing about these, not only can you draw normal lines a bit like a pencil, we can also colour in large areas. We can press really heavy and press light, but it's water soluble. So it means that if I add some water, and I've just realised it's got dirty water, so I'm just going to change. Okay, so with some water, because this is water soluble, I can wet it, and you can see the difference between the dry and the wet side. I can wet it, it wets very, very quickly. I can pull out these areas. So you really don't need much graphite on your page to create a really dark area. And you really find that it can create a really nice monochromatic black and white picture. And it will go very dark very quickly. So you do need to be just a little bit aware of that. But it's a really nice medium to use. And also you'll find it doesn't take much to cover a large area very dark very quickly, if that's what you're after. Okay, so this one's ink. So looking at this pot here, this one is waterproof drawing ink. It comes in lots of different colours, not just black. It's very, very permanent, so beware of your clothing on this one. You can see it's very thick, it's lovely to draw with. It's great to do mark making with. If you use, you know, your own interesting tools, found tools, you can create tools out of twigs and sticks, cut bits of card. And it really does vary from the deepest, darkest black from straight out, and then it will go into sort of greys as it starts to run out. You can also put some water with it and wash it, but you can see if you don't do it quick enough, it will actually leave that line where you just finished doing that drawing. So it sort of leaves a memory. So because I've left that bit there for a few minutes, you'll see that already, even though I will be able to do a wash, it will leave that sort of mark. But it washes quite nicely. So you can already see it sort of the black itself is splitting the colour and starting to go into sort of sepia, which is sort of browns colours as well. So that's ink. So for pen and wash, you need to obviously use a water-soluble pen. So we have quite a few different pens in the art room that are water-soluble. The Artline pens, the 0.6 and the 0.4 are both water-soluble. Just stay away from any that say permanent. These ones are the best ones to use. So having a look at these, we can create some lines, some shaded in areas. And we'll do some, I'll write that down as 0.6. We'll put some in over here that are 0.4, which is obviously a lot thinner. You really don't want to be colouring with a 0.4, it's much thinner pen. And you can also use just regular textures. So these are also water soluble too. So this is a thicker one. Not the best if your actual artwork is mainly pen and wash, but just want to show you that they are water soluble. Just write texture. You can already see the colour difference between these two. And then if we add some water onto these, you'll see that it starts to separate and it goes. You'll see that each pen, when it separates, the colour is quite different. So one pen may go more purpley, one may go more blue. And the idea with a pen and wash image or artwork is that you want to allow some areas to stay purely as pen, as dry pen, some areas to stay as a nice washed area, as more of a sort of painted area, and also to remain some area as your white paper, so to show good control. So you can already see the big difference here between these are showing much more purpley and this is showing a much more of a blue pen. This actually links into science and a chromatography, which is the separation of colour. And so that's pen and wash.